Okay, good. All right, welcome back, everyone. This is APNIC, so first APNIC security session number 2. So we were in the other room before, and make sure that you are in the right location to continue with the security session. We have 2 more presentations, so 2 more speakers for this particular session. We have Etuate as well as Francisco, who will be joining us remotely in a short while. Now, before I proceed, for those of you who are joining the session for the first time, maybe you missed the first bit, just a bit of introduction about this particular session. So this session is a collaboration with the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. They are a community of incident responders that are from all over the world. Occasionally, we also partner with APCERT, the Asia Pacific Computer Emergency Response Team. And the whole idea of this session is to bring experience or showcase some highlights, some current work, some challenges for those who are doing incident response work, so that we can maybe get cooperation and collaboration with network operators, government, universities, and so on and so forth. And of course, we'd like to encourage discussion. So hopefully we can get some questions for the presenters today. And I'm happy to acknowledge that we have participants online as well. So if you are joining us from the internet, wherever you are, thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat for those who are online. And for those who are in the room, we have mics in the room so that you can address the presenters. So without further delay, I'd like to call the first speaker. Hang on a sec. Yeah, first speaker is Etuate, and he's got a long title there for his presentation. I'll let him explain what he's going to be talking about. So let's give him a round of applause so he can deliver his presentation. Yeah. Proceed. Point there.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you have a fair dose of coffee before this session. So I'll try and keep it more informative, so it's more interactive. My name is Eduardo Coca. I'm an APNIC community trainer. But on a day-to-day basis, the work that I do is mostly consultancy. So I lead a team of consultants for Datacom in New Zealand, where we design, build networks as well as securing networks for our customers. Right, what I'm going to talk about today is about some of the best practices that I felt needs to be reinforced so that the community, although they are aware of it, they can implement it on a daily basis. And that could be implemented in the gateway or the core of networks or all the way to endpoints. Right, starting with the first best current practices, filtering of ingress routes. So some of the things you can do is if you have a firewall or router, mitigate against spoofing simply by turning on reverse path forwarding or RPF. And there's different flavors or different methods on how vendors deploy these techniques. Some of it are loose, some of them are more strict. But basically what it is simply to try and identify if a source is routable, right? So if you can reach back to the source for which a packet was received, it simply means that the source is valid. So that's what it is. So there's another more strict method, which is strict as it is. That's what the name of it. And with strict, a router or firewall, simply look for the best path back to the source, so that that way we can validate the source is active. In addition to that, if there are, an option for DDoS, I know for a fact that a lot of vendor firewalls are there. They try and split this functionality into a specific product so that you can just do DDoS. It's all commercial based. But if you have such functionality in the gateway, implement a bit of basic DOS mitigation. So that could be based on the rate for which specific IP addresses are received, which is also known as rate-based DOS mitigation. However, there are other open source tools out there that you can use. Example is the Ultrameus open source, which you can deploy and use it to mitigate against some of the well-known DOS, such as SYNFLAT. Right, BCP048. Again, these numbers that don't make it, this is what is out there in terms of the standards. And that is to do with internet services, developing services and procedures to respond or to mitigate against security attacks. A good example is the APNIC WHOIS database. So for providers out there, if you are responsible for updating your contact info, that is very important. And the reason being is that I've come across many situations where, we see, attacks in logs based on specific IP. And the first thing that most engineers do is do a lookup of that IP, simply to know, the source or who owns that address space. So it's very important for us practitioners in the field to always update, the APNIC WHOIS database. Implement structured processes for sharing information as well as stakeholders. And that could be, deploying a team that are responsible for monitoring as well as responding to threats, as well as notifying customers of specific vulnerabilities. In the line of work that I do on a daily basis, this is something that we always provide to our customers, and it's all commercial. And that could be advising customers that there is a later version of a specific operating system. And on top of that, we provide specific pointers to some of the security features or patches that is implemented on those updates. Right, BCP194, BGP operations and security. Filter your routes, right? So we as community trainers, we provide a session, it's a tutorial, and all members are, welcome to join those sessions where we train those that are attending the session on how to use prefix list, AS path filters, as well as community tag filters, simply to define whatever address information that you own, and you only advertise those information. Again, there was a session yesterday. Don't remember the name of the person, but he mentioned that the need for us to go beyond just using filtering. And in my opinion, it's something that for those that haven't implemented route origin authentication, to register your prefix against the APNIC database and deploy ROA. And if you haven't or do not have any idea of how to deploy this, again, register to one of the APNIC Academy sessions, because we have a specific session that teaches you how to deploy the server, as well as configuring the routers to perform the validation. And again, I'd like to stress it again, just advertise the information that you're responsible for. So in doing so, we don't see a lot of prefix being hijacked, and we keep the internet routing table more cleaner. Right, so I have provided 3 best practices. In my personal opinion, these are my preferred best practices. Enforce confidentiality and integrity. And if you have opted to one of those cloud providers like Okta as an example, enable 2-factor authentication, right? So with password, although we have been depending on it for many years, it is weak. So we need 2FA so that we can prove the identity of a specific person. Implement VPN. However, this is becoming outdated. So in the next 5 years or so, I wouldn't be discussing VPN. So the new technology for VPNs, zero trust access. So that's coming in the market at the moment. So it's pretty hot. I've deployed many of it for different vendors. But simply what it is, it's a more flexible way of establishing remote VPNs from all the clients so that they can secure their network. And it was developed specifically for users that work from home. So the fact that COVID played a role in changing the way we work, zero trust access is becoming something that is important, for securing private access. Always encrypt, right? So if you have a chance, or if you're working with a protocol that there's a more secure version of it, example is HTTPS as opposed to HTTP, enable it, right? And we all know that with those encryption, it enables that the channel is secured. Keep up to date with the basics, update, having the most up-to-date security patches, not only on endpoints, but also on network devices. This is Cisco iOS, the firewall OS. Have up-to-date antivirus signatures, right? So again, they may be the basics, but it's only when, when we are hit by a ransomware or something like that, that we realize the importance of securing the endpoints. Implement security at the border. So if you have a firewall, again, implement the various policies. A lot of vendors out there, they have different ways of implementing security profiles, or also known as next-gen firewall features that you can enable, like intrusion IPS, virus scanning on the border. Again, if you have a vendor that provides those functionality to deploy it, again, where do you deploy it? Depends on which part of the network, right? So you wouldn't deploy it for every user out there. You would deploy it for intranet they do expose to the internet as an example. Right, so those are the best practices. Now, the fact that there's a lot of new technologies coming up. Example are the SD-WAN, the zero trust access, zero touch deployment. I've been thinking about ways for the ordinary users to be able to use these technologies without having to purchase those really expensive commercial products. So a good alternative to SD-WAN or software-defined WAN is the implementation of Open vSwitch. Again, this is taken from a research that was done from the source. And how they deploy it is using device as an operating system. They use Open vSwitch for monitoring the agent, as well as having a few hosts using Docker as a container for testing. Now, basic functionality of SD-WAN is simply to monitor the current status of networks. So very useful if you have BGP multi-homing, or if you enable multipath, eBGP multipath. And in doing so, you can use SD-WAN to monitor the condition of the network, and depending on how much of loss, latency, and jitter that is received by those monitoring agents, different paths is used for transmitting packets. So again, if you don't have any of those commercial expensive products, you can use Open vSwitch to deploy SD-WAN. Right, dynamic multi-point VPN, again, nothing new. So for those of you that have deployed DMVPN for Cisco, so this is open source implementation of that, where you can use things like VIOS, dynamic multi-point version of it, FRR using NextHop routing protocol, or even Open NHRP. So these are alternatives for you to, let's say you want to have a hub and spoke topology between a data center and multiple branches out there. So instead of paying the most expensive product out there, which they are really good at doing what they do, but if you don't have the budget, then these are alternatives for dynamic multi-point VPNs. Right, zero trust access. Been trying to find a good alternative to this. However, these are some of the options that is out there, right? And these options, they don't deploy zero trust access like what you normally do on a commercial software, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is that for these open source softwares, they either secure a specific feature like a container or Kubernetes, but I haven't seen a software that does what a zero trust access is in a commercial version. So with commercial version, we deploy ZDA or zero trust access and enable all the endpoints to establish the TLS tunnel directly to the cloud. And then from there, you manage all the policies, the profiles, whether you're doing deep packet inspection before you send traffic to a data center or directly to the internet. So there's not a lot of open source alternative. Again, very new technology, but it's something that will slowly replace VPN. Zero touch deployment. Again, how this feature works is that you normally enroll all the devices in a cloud platform. And in doing so, all you have to do is establish connectivity to the internet. The device will fetch all the config and be able to establish connectivity easily, right? These are some of the alternative using free ZTP, Ansible, as well as Aeon ZPS. These are pretty good stuff. However, some of them are vendor specific, like the free ZTP was developed specifically for Cisco, right? So in saying that, a lot of the vendors that we're working with, they have a version of ZTP and they are usually free. So if you have a chance to use it or to play around with it, to use it. Right, so that takes us to the last slide. Right, so again, the best current practices that I've discussed, it's not a must for us to follow, but if implemented correctly, it helps us to secure networks. With regards to the alternatives that I mentioned, although it provides the functionalities that is very similar to a commercial software, the only issue that I have is that they are very complex to deploy. You have to know how to configure Linux kernel and deploy it to how you want it. So although they provide the free functionality in terms of support and deployment, you are on your own. The other thing to note is that a lot of these alternatives are slow in terms of development. So that's again an advantage for using vendor products, simply because if you have an issue that you want resolved, vendors they often develop updates for you immediately. Right. If you were asking me, with all these alternatives, Would I deploy it on an enterprise network? I would say no, right? Don't do that, right? And the reason being is that in an enterprise network with millions of devices out there that you're managing, the last thing you need is, working 24/7 every day, right? A lot of engineers know that, right? So if you were asking me, I would where would I develop or deploy these alternatives? I would say on a lab, for a start, and probably a small networks. For those in the developing countries that cannot afford it, I would say deploy it, right? As an alternative, because in developing world, money can be tight. So, but these are alternatives for doing so. Using the latest out there. And finally, as I mentioned, open source, I would say it's the best thing that was invented, simply because with open source packages, those that are in the developing world, like in the Pacific, can use a lot of these open source packages to have a feel of the many advanced technologies that are coming out in the market. And that's it for me. Any question?
Stay there, stay there. So thank you, Etwate. Q&A, we have time for a couple of questions. Anyone who's interested to ask questions, please come to the mic. No, all good. All right. State your name and affiliation for.
Hi, my name is Mike. I work for the Cambodia Network Exchange. We have made good progress in our environment, actually using Ansible to automate most of that. So if you're saying that you wouldn't recommend that, our experience was that enterprise solutions actually cost far more in comparison per capita income, so to speak, in developing countries than it does in developed countries. So for our organizations that we support, it's cost prohibitive to go any other route than open source. So I just wonder why you make that statement, you wouldn't deploy it at enterprises.
Well, for myself, coming from developing countries, I used to work there. To have a budget just for these technologies, I don't think they do. So for these guys that are working out there in the field, in Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji, this is all they have: open source products. That's all they have. They have to download it and use it, or not have anything at all. So it's either you have a software that you can work with, or nothing. Pretty lucky to work with these vendors to implement this stuff, which is good for commercial software, for a commercial company, organizations in New Zealand and Australia. But in the developing world where there's nothing, this is all they have. Yeah.
So it's Azhar, one of the community trainers. Very good presentation. Thank you for that. I'm trying to understand this open source development. It's slow because my understanding is that there are more contributors working on open source than the vendor specific product like a proprietary. So why do you say that the open source, and also most of the commercial products, they running in the back end, the open source software. So is there a reason you say this statement? And there's also a second question, if I can, about the zero trust. So what my understanding was that it's a continuous process and you're not trusting anyone. So why do you apply zero trust only on a VPN for replacement purpose? Why not the other products also? I mean, security products. So what's your take on that?
Sorry, the first question is on the open source development. Yeah. My experience with open source is that it's like, when they see there's a need, they develop it, right? Everyone is rushing in to push codes to develop the product further. But then if they don't see a need to further develop that specific product, then you're left on your own, basically. So that's what it is. For zero trust, can you repeat your question again?
Yeah, so the zero trust, my understanding that, maybe it's a little different than it's a continuous process. So you're not trusting anything in particular. So you have to like go through a cyclic process and make sure that, you're going through these multiple times and trusting it. So you associated this with VPN replacement.
Yeah.
So I would like to know that why only the VPN replacement? Why not the other product? What's the relationship between these two?
Yeah, fair question. Really good question. So the reason why I said or made that statement is that that's the whole purpose of zero trust, is that we are not following the current traditions where you have a data center, you have multiple branches, and for you to be able to access your resources, you use a remote VPN to dial up to the data center, and from there you can access all the branches, or you can dial up directly to any branch if you want to. That has been the tradition that we are used to it. With zero trust, all you have to do is deploy all the endpoints. Endpoints register with a cloud, whatever vendor that you have, they have different clouds. And with that cloud, you manage all the policies. You can do deep packet inspection, you can apply web filtering and all this other cool stuff. And from there, you can dictate whether the user is accessing resources directly. Although they technically, what you're saying is right in the sense that all the endpoints still establish a remote TLS VPN directly to the cloud. But the traditions of us having to dial up to the data center is no longer there. And we don't need to have those data center to branch VPNs. Everything is taken care by the commercial software that you are working with.
Thank you.
All right. Any more question? Anyone? Oh, good. So if not, let's give a round of applause to Etwate. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that. And I think we may have a lot of time to debate open source versus commercial security during the break. All right. So on to the next speaker or next presenter. I'd like to invite Francisco. He's there. I can see him. So Francisco is from Standard Chartered Bank. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us physically. We'll just pretend that he's on stage. And his presentation also has a long title, so I'll let him explain and present his topic. So without further ado, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you all. Thank you, Adil.
Yep.
And I hope you see me and you hear me well, guys.
Yes.
It's a pity I cannot be there with you. So, all right, let me then just share my screen and tell me if you're going to see it all right. So, all right. Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
You can see it now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. All right. And you see it in you see the full screen, right? Not the notes, correct?
Yeah, full screen.
Excellent. So team, first members and APNIC members, well, hello everyone. My name is Francesco. I am the head of cyber resilience here at Standard Chartered Bank. Today I'll talk about cyber resilience and specific ways how we can actually get that implemented, not necessarily like with huge costs. This is more like an approach that requires both the threat management knowledge, the adversary knowledge, and then as well the way how to architect things. A couple of words about me before to start. I'm here at the bank from almost 1 year. Before here, I worked. I dedicated my career to incident response, digital investigations, as well crisis management, and I come from the Pepsi team. I'm based in Poland. Typically, today I'm in London, and I founded as well the ISSA.org Cyber Resilience Special Interest Group. If you're an ISSA member as well, feel free to join, and we can have a chat. It's as part of FIRST. I'm a huge supporter of FIRST for everything that is being done. I'm a member of the Security Metrics SIG, and co-authored a paper on how to identify the best timing metrics for security incident response. And as well, I'm part of other SIGs and funded a couple of SIGs in there as well. Just to finish this piece, I'm currently I'm working with the World Economic Forum on the Cyber Resilience Working Group, and as well with MITRE.org on a new paper around high-value targets related to cyber resilience. So today I'm going to give you a quick overview of what cyber resilience is, why is it relevant really, and this is just to give a quick overview as well of then the next frameworks available. So NIST 800 160 and MITRE Cyber Resilience Engineering Framework. And why I'm going to do that is just because cyber resilience is often misunderstood in the industry. Sometimes vendors, like the previous speaker was speaking about zero trust, and so it's used sometimes as a buzzword for many things. And so I'd like to just get those basics right, and then we're going to move into like this threat-informed architecture part, where we can actually really look at how can we operationalize cyber resilience using the MITRE attack framework, focused though on certain assumptions that I explained there. I really like to have some questions from the audience. So if anytime you have a question, please feel free to write it in the chat as well, or just let's have a chat after this. I could go on and talking about this stuff for hours and hours. So at the end, you have my contact details in case as well, we can, if you're a first.org member and Standard Chartered is a first.org member, then we can have as well dedicated session if anyone is interested. So let's start like really high level, right? So working for a financial institution, then I couldn't start with anything but this slide, right? Which is from the European Systemic Risk Board, and it's inspired by the Financial Stability Board approach to the microfinancial risks. So this is just to say that when we speak about resilience overall, we need to think about the resilience, so the ability to go back to our original state of our own organization, but as well of our interconnected parties, including other financial institutions, and as well looking at the given country or as well the whole globe in terms of um, microfinancial services that are being delivered. Some of these these are very interesting topics. If you are into cyber risk and the interactions with resilience of a overall market, I encourage you to read those links below, and you have as well the presentation, so you can look at that. On the right side, you see as well like what is the concept, like more on the methodology side, right? This is something out there from already 2006 from Birkman, and so specifically, we want to actually address the the second and third circle from the bottom, right? So basically, we want to ensure that we have our systems are engineered with certain coping capacity and ability to resist to susceptibility. So certain system weaknesses and failures are actually handled within the certain organization. As well, we want to ensure that our exposure is specifically limited and we have a good enough adaptive capacity. Why I'm saying all this? These are some of the, if there's some, on top of the defenders and investigators that are probably in the room and network people, then as well, if you have some SAMSA or TOGA for architects, then these are concepts that are going to be quite familiar in the way how we architect things. So what is cyber resilience compared to other things though? Because oftentimes cyber resilience is misunderstood with the traditional business continuity, disaster recovery, or crisis management. So those are covered, if you're familiar with NIST, those are covered by NIST 834, the disaster recovery planning. And this is the piece on the left. So the goal there is to get back to normal operations. It's typically like about restorability. I have data center A goes down, then I go to data center B. The assumption though there is that you have where to recover from. On the traditional cybersecurity side, this is more like of a fortress, a castle. Again, nothing really specifically new. The purple, red, blue concept. And here we actually assume the predictability and defendability of our environment. It means that we know that the adversaries can be predicted, and as well, we assume that our defense tools, including Splunk, the net flows, the IDS and firewalls, and so that they are all available for us to then investigate. On cyber resilience instead, we actually do, we assume the inability to recover, predict, or defend. And so that's why that makes you think in a specific different manner. So somehow we are actually looking at our environment more of a cave. That's actually the picture that you see on the right, like a cyber cave. I tried to do my best with some graphics there. And so this then evolves the concept of traditional cybersecurity from a perimeter model or information security model based on NIST 853 and NIST 861, the incident response, and the security baseline for 853, towards the next level thing. So almost entering into an assumed breach type of condition. This is just a quick summary then. And so just to move on, NIST 800-160 and the MITRE Cyber Resilience Engineering frameworks are two frameworks that if you're not specifically familiar with those, I highly encourage you to read through. The only issue is this, that those are kind of scientific papers. I've met few organizations so far that are able to specifically implement all of what is in there. I think, like just to speak about, for example, NIST 800-160, that's over 200 pages of cyber resiliency constructs. And it's a complementary documentation to the IEEE 15288 papers on cyber resilience. So it's kind of not immediate to apply. Somehow though, there is huge value if we actually dig deeper, and we surely as Standard Chartered Bank we're trying our best to bring this into practice in our day-to-day. On the why are we doing this, and so why is it important? This is a standard deck, so I'm gonna skip this part a little because I think that we all understand what are the regulators around these areas, and as well the need for incident response teams to actually expand the specific vulnerability management or CTI piece and threat informed defense piece into actually having the skills that are outlined into the CSIRT framework from FIRST, which are around system restoration of affected domains and as well business continuity and disaster recovery planning support. These are like required capabilities within an incident response team. So I think that bringing closer these two worlds of the traditional recovery world and as well the architecture world on cyber resilience, there is value in there. In terms of incidents, again, I will not spend a lot of time here. This is something that all of us know. I think just a little thought, like these companies that you see over here all believe that they were cyber resilient, right? So why is then that something went wrong and situation got worse? So how can we possibly do our best to try to prevent suffering massive large-scale group level annihilating attack? So in terms of best practices, and here is the second point on the agenda, I'm going to move on the on an overview of MITRE, CRF, and NIST 800-160. Before I continue, Adil, everything good? Yes, you can hear me all right, I guess, right? Yeah. So before we continue, and if you're thinking like, why are we talking about this? And so like there is a nice paper that is around how to overcome certain barriers to adopting new methods to actually implement things and architect things. So I encourage you to read this paper from the Global Risk Institute. It's pretty good. Specifically, I'd like to just you to open your mind a little for this like next 15-20 minutes and look at what these frameworks have to offer. So first of all, cyber resilience comes really like the first definition of resilience was then adopted directly by the author of NIST of cyber resilience was from really the White House from 2010. And the definition reads that resilience is the ability to adapt to changing conditions and prepare for, withstand and rapidly recover from disruption. So cyber resilience is a mix of a number of disciplines, and is part of the broader idea of mission assurance engineering. So it's somehow preparing to architect things for the unknown. Okay. There are a number of principles that are identified. This is like bread and butter for the architects, right? So here these are nice graphics that I just extrapolated from these papers. And I think on the right side, you see like a legend showing you on the top the different colors of those disciplines. This is though a bit scientific, but it's just for you to see that there are a number of very nice attributes and principles that we can learn from, and I'll show you now how we can directly apply those in what we do. This 800-160 instead compares the IT systems, more than IT really, can be any system that processes information to the human body. So we have powerful immune system that absorbs a constant barrage of environmental hazards. Then we have self-defense mechanisms to maintain a healthy state, and then repair abilities to recover from illness and injury. So somehow what cyber resilience is about, and there is this whole framework that you see on the left, is a set of goals, objectives, techniques that allow us to build our systems in a way that they are already able to go back to the previous state, despite cyber stresses and cyber attacks. There are 5 strategic design principles that are defined in there. And I'm going to just deep dive in those just for a moment right now. So the first is that you focus on critical assets. And here is the assets that are of high value to your organization, but think as well about the assets that are of high value to the adversary. So we'll talk about that later on. As well, we have to support agility and architect for adaptability. So the threat landscapes clearly keeps evolving, the adversaries evolve, and they keep reusing tools. Low capability adversaries are able then to reuse the tools of high capability ones very quickly. The attack surface piece is kind of obvious. So the larger the attack surface, the more difficult to defend. And then we have the assumption of compromised resources in a way that when we do certain adversary emulation for those high-value assets or high-value targets, we can actually assume breach and dechain the kill chain and just focus on TA0040. And as well, obviously, the adversaries will keep evolving and will pivot from their original mission to other alternative missions if they're motivated enough. I will just, the next of the slides are like here for illustration purposes, as I want to really go deeper into the TA0040 and MITRE attack piece and how we can do something actionable out of this. So you have actually the slides in PDF. If you can't find them, then just reach out to me. And so here are the 14 techniques, objectives, and 4 goals of cyber resilience. Here you have like a mapping of, depending on where you want to start in your journey, if you didn't start yet implementing these concepts into your organization, there are different ways you can start from, like looking at the goals or looking at the strategic principles. And here is how the goals map to the 8 objectives, right? So there are different ways of someone can approach this stuff. So another way, more technical, is looking at the techniques and underlying approaches, but this creates you like a kind of a large set of combinations over 44 that can be then looked at, which can be a bit difficult. What cyber resilience engineering framework allows you to have is as well to like directly look at the impact of the adversaries on your risk profile. So there is in there very nice guidance that you can take, linking the risk to the adversarial actions and effects of defense over the adversarial mission. Last but not least, MITRE is clearly more than just the attack framework. So looking at the cyber resilience guidelines, you can actually go beyond attack And you can then start looking at things like the CAPEC MITRE adversary elimination like libraries. You can look at shield, defend, and engage and others, right? Right, so this is like a quick overview of certain ways how to you can choose specific techniques and approaches based on the maturity of your organization. And then here is like a sample best-in-class type of one-pager of what are some of these system capabilities that you want to implement and how do they map to the MITRE mitigations on the right. So this is a lot to take in, and clearly, this could be like a multi-day workshop. But I'd like to specifically move to what can we do with it, right? Again, in the interest of our defender mindset and how we can bring these architectural concepts into life. So if you're probably familiar with MITRE ATT&CK, then I'd encourage you to look at something that is not always looked at is are the MITRE impact tactics, the TA0040. So this is a set of 16 tactics that are adopted by the adversaries, and out of the 290 techniques, there are these 14 that are kind of interesting. So one way to start implementing what I just showed you is to actually look at those and start looking at what are the impacts that that you are most concerned for your organization. So I just chose in green some representative ones that we are oftentimes probably looking at overall as defenders, right? But this is illustrative, and those are chosen from the Verizon DBIR findings, right? So this is like a generic example, but this can be customized. Suppose that those are those two scenarios that I just showed you before. So those chosen impacts that correspond to destructive malware and intrusions or unauthorized access. This can be then mapped back to you can just look at the technique IDs from MITRE ATT&CK that are there with the T name. Then you have the corresponding MITRE impact descriptions, and then the MITRE mitigations for those, right? The M something something. These map to the NIST 800 160 techniques that you see on the right. So redundancy, deception, segmentation, and so on. Let me just go a bit more into the detail now. So this means that for us to be able to mitigate those two scenarios for destructive malware and unauthorized access, we can actually implement those 6 specific techniques and go and look at the way how our high-value assets and high-value targets are actually architected and designed. So for example, for redundancy, right? It's about certain things can be done around, for example, disaster recovery plans to make sure that they include destructive malware scenarios, and as well look at the way how certain assumptions are tested in terms of the recovery point objective or the recovery time objectives. As well, it could be, for example, another quick idea for the redundancy portion, to have the incident response team or other teams to monitor after certain thresholds of unsuccessful backups for given assets are actually not in place. So this is a nice source of logs that can be onboarded on the SIEM and not only monitored by a backup team. As the time is passing by, I will not have a lot of time to discuss all the examples, but if, again, there's any first.org member out there or FSISOC member, then reach out personally and we'll go deeper. In terms of implementing some of these techniques, then you need to look at these guidelines from US CISA, NIST 800 160 and 172. And this then, it's not maybe a super easy exercise, but using this type of approach is going to be at least doable, and you can start small and then expand later. How to measure? This is the almost the last piece. Once you have done all the rest, there are methodologies to actually measure and have dashboards for your high-value targets to actually look at how these cyber resilience principles are actually applied. This can be done as a yearly thing or quarterly, or if you're even lucky to have continuous controls monitoring or compliances code or policy and compliance configuration checks, then you can do a number of things. So what are the key messages for today? So in short, right, we need to ensure that we account as defenders for the architectural the way how we architect systems, and as well the way how the traditional disaster recovery world operates. We have to just ensure that we account for the unpredictability of the adversaries, right? We have to ensure that we design our processes in a way that is resilient by design, in fact, and focus on more than just identify, respond, recover. Focus on the withstand piece, and focus on the tools that we implement on the day-to-day, and the way how adversaries can actually turn these tools against us. So the last point is something I specifically like very much, which is focus not only on what is considered like a severe but plausible scenario of one application taken down once at a time for given countries or regions, but think about as well what are the extreme but plausible scenarios that your organization face. So what if all of our, I don't know, defense infrastructure was taken down? Then what do we do then, right? There's this is like a bonus slide from me because a friend of Adil and the team. So this is just a set of great resources that you can read. This is a lot of reading, a lot of studying in there. Again, if you have any question, then feel free to reach out. This said, thank you very much. I will now stop sharing. If you are interested as well in contributing into the concept of high value targets, I stood up like a page over there. You can provide feedback. It's highvaluetarget.org. In the contact section, you can just request access to the file and just peer review a paper that I'm currently writing for MITRE.org. I'll stop sharing now, and let's see if there is any question from the team.
Thank you, Francisco. Let's give him a quick round of applause for.
Thank you.
There was an impressive crash course on cyber resilience with lots of resources for people to go back and read and study. Can we get some questions for Francisco, since he's here and he woke up very early to join us? So let's make it worth it for him.
That's early, man. It's like
I
woke up like at 6:30. Nah, it's fine. I'm good.
Yeah,
I like to wake up early.
All right. Please come to the mic and maybe share your name and affiliation. Yeah, good.
My name is Mike. I work in Cambodia for the Internet Exchange. So if I can take away one thing from your presentation, what I understood is basically figure out what is the most high value target, and then make it so expensive for the attacker to get information about it that they simply give up. Is that kind of the drive that we should be looking into?
So you said a number of, so the answer is yes, but not only. Yeah. So it's not only about the attacker to find and retrieve information about the high value targets, right? But it's as well, how are we actually going to design this high value target in a way that even if it gets compromised by an advanced adversary, right, then things don't go down specifically as a domino effect afterwards. I give an example, right? So all of us, for example, probably very well protect our domain controllers, our Active Directories, our crown jewels, probably our the assets that store secrets, right? So our identity management and all of that. However, how many of the companies in here protect equally the certain tools that are used, for example, for patch management, right? Or the tools that are used to deploy software to our endpoints, right? Or our EDR systems that our incident response teams use on the everyday, right? So this can be turned against us. So clearly, the adversaries want to know what these tools are, but as well, how can we engineer those environments in a way that, for example, we introduce dual authorization, we introduce certain a lag between the time when Apaches deployed from the primary authoritative servers down to the secondary servers and then down to all the endpoints, right? So how are we engineering those tools in a way that despite compromise, then we don't go down as a whole, but we just limit the damage. So really cyber resiliency is, you can look at it from different angles, but the one I like the most is not so much about reducing the likelihood of impact, because you have already cybersecurity all around this. But this is specifically specializing on what is on reducing the magnitude of impact once things happen, right? This is described in NIST 837. We can have a further discussion as well if you like. I hope I answered.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
we see. Yeah.
Cool, man.
Any other question from the crowd? No. Maybe one question from me, Francisco, if it's okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So this is basically a huge program for organizations, right? To run something like this. Can you just give us an indication, like how much effort is involved in doing or coming up with a program like this, or what is needed?
So I think that it depends very much on how we want to scope it, right? So you could start potentially from just looking at the certain objectives, the ones that I actually shared earlier on, right? So there's a total of, well, there are 4 goals, and then 8 objectives, and then 14 techniques and 44 combinations of approaching and techniques. MITRE specifically says that you need to focus on what's most critical, most important for your organization, depending on where you are in the journey, in your journey, right? There's organizations that are, I don't know if among the participants there's only big, large corporations, or there's as well like small, medium businesses, right? So when you look at the maturity of your security program, cyber resilience is not just something for the elites, something that requires millions and millions of investments. Clearly, if you have like millions, it's great, but there are certain things that certain principles that you can actually already implement into the security architecture phase, right? And things that are not necessarily expensive by default. So I think, realistically speaking, if you have like a large estate to protect with hundreds of thousands of users and dozens of data centers all around the world, definitely the best place to start, from my view, is to first of all establish 3 things. One is a person responsible for cyber resilience in the organization. Well, I'm responsible here for Standard Chartered Bank, and I encourage you, and this is in line with the World Economic Forum findings that we have, establish a cyber resilience officer, right? So someone that can actually take care of these things. Number 2 is identify the high value targets, but don't only rely on the traditional business impact analysis, rely on the high value target to the adversary. So here you can look at the paper that I posted on highvaluetarget.org, and you can give me feedback on that. And then the number 3 is really looking at these extreme but plausible scenarios that can affect those high value targets. This is a mix. So you get in a room security architecture, you get in the room your red teaming, you get in the room the IT admin, and then you have the cyber resilience officer that is an expert a bit of those to actually facilitate a session. So it's less things on paper, really, and more things in reality. And yeah, I hope I kind of covered that. Maybe I went a bit off, but just.
No, that's good. That's good. All right. So thank you for that. And we don't have much time left, but I think everyone here appreciate your presentation. Of course, we have some people online as well. And looking forward to maybe seeing you in the future at our event. So let's give one huge round of applause for both speakers for our session, Eduardo and Francisco. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for joining our first APNIC security session this time. We look forward to seeing you maybe at our next conference in the future. and as well myself and my colleague Jamie. Jamie, identify yourself. Yeah, so we are from the APNIC security engagement team. If you need to check with us on our work and what we do for our engagement work in the region, come and see us. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully you have a good rest of the conference. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye. Thank you, Francisco.